Jamie here. Hope everyone's doing outstanding. November 8th, 2024, 8:30 on this fine post-Fed Friday. Talk really quick about the market, some names I'm looking at, go from there. Take a look at S&P futures, or actually futures in general, slightly in the red. And considering the huge move we had this week, S&P's up nearly, it was over 4% this week so far coming into today. NASDAQ's up over 5%, just remarkable rallies. And that's in the face of new highs, right? We're at all-time highs. So pretty impressive. I always use that phrase, new highs beget new highs, and that'll probably continue some areas. So yesterday, the Fed meeting, and I put in a watch list. It's like it was one of the more muted moves on the Fed that I can remember in recent memory. I mean, it was 100% probability that they were going to cut rates 0.25%. So maybe that's some of it. So I don't think there wasn't much of a surprise element. So typically up into that 2 o'clock hour, you see kind of the spreads widen on like SPY options, things like that. That didn't happen so much. And then when the statement came out, the market barely budged. Then Fed Chair Powell came out at 2:30, and just listened to his presser. It was there was drama, right? I mean, multiple times he was asked if he thought he was going to get fired, and it was like an awkward silence, and he just says no. And then that was it. There was no follow-up. And then someone asked kind of in a different way, and he says, uh, there's no legal basis to be fired, something like that. So interesting stuff. So I don't see, I mean, I get it, but he started his pressure saying he doesn't want to talk about the political side of things, and then people are asking political questions. It's funny how that works. But he did address it. So he did his opening comments, and then one of his questions, he started talking about yields and the surprise run up in yields since they did their jumbo rate cut in the middle of September. And he kind of said it was because the market's pricing a stronger economy and less risk, right? It's being de-risked. I guess that makes sense. Probably some of it might be the deficit, more spending, things like that. But then someone worded it a different way, and he said, "Well, we don't really know why yields are going up." So it was kind of funny. But then, I put on the watches. I don't think, his job is not to worry about yields, right? That their mandates are full employment and keeping inflation around 2%. So those are the mandates. It's not to keep the 10-year yield at a certain level. But I just hope that starts to teeter down a little bit, because I think that could be the next. I'll at least keep the market supported. So I put on the watch list that gap. I think it's 591.92 was the close on Wednesday. We gapped higher on Thursday. So just want to see that gap hold. And then also, actually, what day is that I'm looking at? And then it's the 585 handle. But if we get crazy shenanigans on the flip side, that 600 spot on the SPY, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of chatter around that handle being broken, or at least the S&P. All right, so that's that. Individual and overall, so small caps down to 30%, considering it was up over nearly 6% on Wednesday. I mean, probably a little more consolidation today, and then I think that 240 handles the next spot. And then you look at yields, finally came down yesterday. Hopefully that is continuation. And now some individual names. So after the open yesterday, Dell spiked pretty much to highs it hit on Wednesday, and then it gave it back, and then the premiums were eroding. It was trading at like 137.50, and my calls for next week just kept eroding despite the stock pretty much flatlining. So I didn't want to lose profits on that, and I figured I was going to add some more strikes at some point, so I locked the rest in. I'll probably add some strikes at some point. I think it trades into over 145 in the next week or two, but I'll be patient. But nice run so far. And you take a look, Super Micro's running again today, was running yesterday. So I don't know if that's some of the reason why Dell has struggled recently, but I still think it's headed higher in the coming weeks. Gilead. So while I was staring at Dell and Micron yesterday morning at the open, Gilead spiked out of the gate. It was like 93 and change at the open, and I had it on the watch list to add some strikes. And then by the time I took a peek at it, it was going 96. Once it broke 97, I got some spec calls. It's one of those names. I pulled the longer term chart. I think I put it on a watch list, but you look at it, it's at all-time high levels in regards to its chart. So again, I'll bring that phrase out. New highs beget new highs. I think the 3 handles coming, and if it doesn't come today, it's going to come next week. So from that chop after the open spike, it chopped for the rest of the day. Premiums came down. Some opportunity, maybe some calls to next week. Don't be surprised if I add some more calls. And unfortunately, my spec lottos, pending a crazy move here today, probably going to expire, unfortunately. But that comes with the territory when you do weekly spec calls. So that's Gilead. Oh, that's the short-term chart. Micron. So I put this chart in there too. I call it the forgotten stepchild, or what? I don't know if that's the best analogy, but 115 is the big breakout point. 113.50 yesterday, it struggled. So maybe if you can get through that over 115, I think it's off to the races. If not today, then next week. I got some calls play for move over 120. I think that happens quickly. It it was up 6% Wednesday, still 1.4% yesterday, so not too much. I mean, it is up from $100 since the start of November, but I think there's still some opportunity for it to outperform. I keep using the comparison of AMD back in the summer when it hit $120, and then 2 weeks later it was 160. So I'm not saying it's going to have deja vu here, but I do think there's a similar setup. That's Micron. Travelzoo flat as a pancake. Going to need this to start to move here into next week, so I can close the last of my November strikes. And then if it breaks over 18 and holds, I'll look to get those December and/or March strikes. But I'll wait for 18 first. I still love that story. Lemonade, disappointing to have that boutique firm coming out and downgrading the stock yesterday. Kind of took the wind out of the sails, but it still held up well. Was 27 at the noon hour, then bounce closed at 27.33. Still think there's life in this one too. All it's going to need is a little kick. If it starts going again today, I think it's off to the races over $30 into next week. That's Lemonade. Still holding some of those November strikes and the Decembers that I added. Clear Secure. It's one of those names. It just drives you nuts, and sometimes that's what the market does, right? It drives you nuts. Huge. I thought it was a great quarter. Beat and raise, although some people are saying they missed on EPS, although the original estimates were lower. And even though they say it was a miss, it was a slight miss, which again, I didn't see, but I don't think that warrants the 25% decline. To me, it smells like a bear rate. It's 28% short interest. I talked about it before. Bloomberg used to put out hit pieces on Clear Secure, like some short was paying Bloomberg to publish these pieces, or maybe they got a shaking hand agreement. I don't know what it was. That just means it continues to be a name that once the shorts find the opportunity to pressure it, they do. And I think that's what happened yesterday. I'm going to wait for the dust to settle before adding more strikes. It's one of the best growth stories out there. I think it heads higher into 2025, but I'll be patient. Just so disappointing. It was up 100% coming into earnings, and it was $18 back in August. It doesn't mean it can't go to $60, but unfortunately it went the other way. So just disappointing. Corbis, another name, reported earnings. I didn't know it was reporting earnings, and with Corbis, it's not about its earnings, it's about its updates on its cash position and its pipeline, which both came on track. It was actually over $20 in the morning before pulling back. Still like this one. If you get back over $20, I'll look for some December strikes. Redfin, similar to Corbis, didn't know it was reporting earnings after the close yesterday. It finally had a solid day yesterday on the heels of Zillow earnings. And then this morning, then after I was reporting earnings, it was a miss. But then he offered up a nice revenue, bump in revenue guidance for Q4. And then I think the market's going to start pricing profitability in 2025. If that's the case, I think it could be a bounce candidate here today. If it starts to break over 11, I'll look for some strikes to play for a move to 12 plus into next week. That's Redfin. And then SE report earnings Tuesday morning. Still looking for some strikes here. Asian markets were kind of mixed overnight, so maybe they'll be weak. You see some of the China ADRs, which looked like they were starting to gain some steam yesterday, lost it this morning. So I don't know. Maybe I'll just be patient and look for some Monday. But premiums are expensive. I might even do post earnings. If you take a look at the last time I traded SE back in the summer, I traded the day of earning when they reported earnings and the stock spiked and they paid off. So maybe that might be a nice strategy there. I mean, that's it, folks. We got a little more than 50 minutes to the open. I'll be back on audio later. Let's have a great day. Rock and roll.